Okay, so now we're coming into the beginning of our inquiry, and this is just some thinking around focus questions and how we're going to develop those. The categories that we are using for this inquiry are background events and key dates, significant individuals or groups, events that represent changes, and the overall significance. And I'll go into those a little bit further on in way more detail for you. Here we have some sample questions. The ones from the fourth dot point down are quite useful, and you could use them absolutely as sample questions. I'm happy for you to borrow them, to use them as a sample. You could change them up a little bit because sometimes it's hard to get started, and these are just some good questions you can start thinking about and that you can actually use. Okay, so the next thing down is like having a look at the definitions of things. So this one here, historical concepts, you can find those in the history toolkit, which is chapter 7 of your book. And that one, and they have paid like a kind of an area per concept, so continuity and change, significance, contestability and perspectives. These are the major ideas that are sitting behind this inquiry, and they also are the major ideas that historians look at every day in their own research. So it's really important to have a very good understanding of what these are, and you're going to keep coming back as well throughout the inquiry. So if you need to go back and have a look, that is a great place to start in your textbook, and please pop those definitions just in this little section here. So we need the definitions for those. On the left we have the historical terms, and they're ones that you might find useful when you're starting to research to sort of have a good understanding of first. Now, imperialism is an important idea. Revolution is another important idea. Agrarian and industrialization are ones that they're these, big ideas that we are connecting to in these depth studies that we're looking at in history. So again, just putting in this section here the definitions for those, and you can find them on your trusty search engine. A dictionary will be plenty enough for those. Alrighty, so coming through here, this is our first table that relates to the marks, the marking key, and this is the question part. So again, you see here on this side here, you've got research area. And what that one does is that provides the categories for the questions. So these are the groupings of the questions that you need to start generating. In the middle is the focus question, and this is the main question for each area that you'll be really using to guide your research. And this one might be a bit broader because you're sort of trying to cover, you might be trying to cover quite a large topic. Sub-questions are just the more specific questions that might work off your focus questions. Now, you can see here I've got where appropriate, because not every focus question lends itself to a sub-question. If you can generate one or two of each focus question, that is what you'd be looking for. Sometimes some topics will lend themselves to have more specific questions, and again, that just depends. We're really looking mostly at the focus question. That's sort of the more important one there. Okay, so if we're looking at background events and key dates, it could be as simple as, what were the background events and key dates that led to the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution? And the sub-question would be, is there a particular event that sparked the Industrial Revolution? Was there something that we could trace back? Is there a key date in the history of the Industrial Revolution that could be useful to historians? That sort of question that we can look at there. Don't worry if your focus questions are a bit general. It often is the case. Okay, then the next one we go down to is significant individuals or groups. Now, that will depend. You're just asking the question at this point. So what you don't want to do at this point is go, I need to find the answer to that now. You're just asking questions. We don't want you to find the answers until the next step down. So what often happens in this part is that people start to doubt the questions, or they don't feel confident just asking questions. They feel like they've got to ask the question and have the answer straight away. So that can be a bit challenging. You're really more looking at, well, what's the questions I can ask? Once you've posed the questions and you've completed your research, you may find that you might need to adjust your questions somewhat, and that's perfectly fine. But you must ask them before you research. That is the process. That's what we're looking for. So again, is there any significant individuals or groups? Your focus question could be, what were the significant individuals or groups involved in the Industrial Revolution? That is a good question. It doesn't matter if you're using key words from that category. That's really good practice, and that is perfectly fine. There might be, and then you might kind of looking again at sub questions. Was there a key individual who invented a technology? Was there a key factory owner that, introduced better working conditions? Depending on your topic, just kind of have a really good think around it. No question is wrong. As long as it's related to your topic and it sits within these categories, that's what we're looking for. Okay, I want to focus a little bit here on these short-term and long-term impacts, and this last one here, which is continuity. Okay, so with the short-term impacts, you're looking at immediate, so what happens next, or maybe a few years down the track. So I think a good keyword for that one, or question, is what happens next. Now, that's not the question I want you to ask on paper, but I want you to sort of associate that question with short-term impacts. Okay, what happened next? So once the new working laws were introduced into the factories, what happened next? Did things automatically get better? Were there factory bosses that didn't implement the new laws? Did living conditions get better? Well, you know what? They might not have, because sometimes the wheels of history are slow to turn. Government policies take a while. So, what's kind of happening next? And that could be, depending on your event, straight away, or it might be a couple of years down the track. So you can actually ask that. What was the impact 3 or 4 years after the event? Okay. What was the impact the next day? Of the event, and it really will depend on your topic. Obviously, if you're looking at the impact of an invention, you probably are looking at a few years down the track when that's sort of been refined. And 3 or 4 years is even okay, again, depending on what you're having a look at there. If you want an example of short-term impacts, your textbook for the Industrial Revolution will show you a few of those as well. But you're more looking in the time period itself. Okay, the next one is the long-term impacts. Now, that can be 10 years down the track. It can be 20, 50, 100 years. What is going on over the long term? So, what's the impact of the invention of the spinning jenny, which was a cotton machine? The impact was long term that we could mass produce goods and, be able to have that the standard of living, be higher, that they could buy clothes at a cheaper price, and same with food as well. When things are mass produced, you can get more of them for cheaper, and then that has a flow-on effect. But things like, improvement in living conditions, that doesn't always, again, happen straight away. Not for many people. It's 5 years to 10, or it might be 20 years down the track. It's these kind of longer term things. Now, I don't want you to confuse this long-term impact with continuities. So long-term is after the event, could be 10 years, could be 50, could be 100. Not to be confused, though, with what continues today. Okay, so continuity is what has continued. Well, if you're looking at the Industrial Revolution, for example, mass production has continued. So even though our factories might look different, we might have different working conditions, okay, our actual ways of which we kind of are manufacturing these mass productions of these mass goods are the same. Or what you could also argue is that the aspect of having cheaper goods is the same, or that it's been kind of built upon, that it's kind of gotten even more extreme today. You might argue that there's still people in the world that do experience working conditions that were experienced by children. There is still child labour in developing countries. So, look for those things. You'll notice them, in your own world, and look around and kind of really consider, okay, well, I'm asking a question, well, what's continued on till today? And that can be, the question can be as simple as that. And significance then. So, how important is it? That's what we're asking you to look at. How important is the development of new technology in producing goods for people? Well, you can argue it's very important later on. So just, again, asking the question, what is the significance of the Industrial Revolution? Has it continued to the present day? Okay, so that's what we're looking there. Alrighty, so the next section is we're going on to our sources, but we're going to do that one in the third lecture. So I'm going to stop this one here, give you a little break. Hopefully this has been helping to make the process clear so far, but please, if you do need any help, I'm happy for you to email me. Mrs. Kirkham on my email, or you can of course go and see your trusty teacher. Okay, so part 2 done, and we'll be on to part 3 in just a minute. Thanks for listening.